Hello and welcome. My name is David McElroy, the session moderator, and I will be delighted to introduce this breakout session's presenters. We have Principal Analyst Martin Scott and Senior Analyst Giulio Sinibaldi. Before commencing the session titled Operator Strategies for Emerging Content, Gaming, VR, Video, and Beyond, I'd like to let you know that we welcome your questions throughout the session. You can submit your questions in the Q&A widget, and if we don't have time to answer all of your questions during the Q&A session, a member of our team will follow up directly with you after the event. You are unable to download copies of the actual slides. However, this session will be available on demand in about 1 or 2 hours' time. Now, on that note, I will pass straight over to Martin. So Martin, over to you when you're ready.
Thank you, David. And thank you very much, everyone, for joining this session. My name is Martin Scott. As Dave said, I'm a principal analyst here at Analysys Mason, and I head up our video, gaming, and entertainment research.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Giulio Sinibaldi. I'm a senior analyst, and I have been specializing on gaming research and operator strategies in the gaming space.
Thanks, Giulio. So this session is all about growth opportunities for operators in consumer sectors that are adjacent to their core telecoms business. It's based on a series of current and forthcoming reports from our video, gaming, and entertainment research program. I'll mention the names of these reports as we go along. In a little more detail, here's what we will cover. Firstly, we plan to explore the opportunities for operators to diversify into adjacent content areas and to grow new markets and content categories to gain both direct revenue and indirect benefits. Secondly, streaming video is one of the most immediately addressable facets of VR, and it's also potentially a good fit for what operators are doing around 5G. In this part of the presentation, we'll qualify the market opportunity for VR video on demand content and for streaming live events in VR, and look at some examples of how operators are deploying it. Finally, we will look in more detail at the gaming opportunity. Consumers will have spent $147 billion on digital gaming worldwide in 2020. That's going to almost double in the next 5 years. Operators have an opportunity to secure a share of this revenue. Let's start with some numbers and context for the area that we're looking at. Telecom service revenue worldwide generated $1.34 trillion in 2019. It's going to grow by only about $40 billion between now and 2025. We need to find growth, and logically, there are adjacent markets that we can look at. TV and video is the big one, and telcos' roles here are, for the most part, well established. The wider TV and video market was worth about $640 billion in 2019, and that will grow by about $130 billion to 2025. That's about 3 times the net increase that we expect for telecoms. A lot of that potentially goes to non-telecoms players, but there are opportunities for telcos too. But the video opportunity is not infinite, and there are further opportunities outside of TV and video that are very much worth exploring. And these are areas that we are either seeing real revenue growth in, or the opportunity for telcos to take a greater role in a market, even if that market itself isn't growing. The gaming industry has been buoyant throughout 2020 and the pandemic, and we expect gaming to grow from a $130 billion industry last year to $240 billion in 2025. That's almost as much absolute revenue growth as the whole of TV and video from a much lower base. That kind of scale change means regime change, new opportunities that might not be as available as for established markets like TV, and that's why we're interested. I've added VR in here without a revenue figure because, as we will explore shortly, one needs to be careful about how you measure VR. VR is a tool, and much of VR could be classified under gaming or under TV and video. So I want to highlight it separately because it's a reasonable opportunity when we think on a 10-year time frame rather than on a 5-year one. The online publishing and music industries, while small and not growing, are still useful for telecoms operators, not necessarily as revenue generators in their own right, but in supporting core revenues. And that's an important consideration in all of this, how these other services, when bundled with telecom services, can help to protect existing revenues and gain market share. That's particularly important when thinking about 5G. Operators will and should look to new types of content to encourage the adoption of 5G. Now, in this slide, I've attempted to look at some of the different roles that operators can play within each of these sectors. Firstly, TV and video. The roles are well established, though it's interesting to note a distinct shift in philosophy over the last couple of years. Operators view aggregation with greater importance than they did previously. In some instances, we've seen operators give up on being a pay TV provider in their own right entirely and focus on aggregation of OTT services. I suspect we'll see more of this in the next few years. Some particular examples to draw attention to are, for example, how AT&T may be backing away from its direct TV business in the USA, or how TDC's brand UC in Denmark uses a points-based system to allow customers to interchange TV channels for partner OTT services completely flexibly within the self-service portal. The roles that operators can play in the gaming market are starting to shape up. Two of the most common examples of approach are to partner with cloud gaming specialists, a few such partnerships are listed on the right, or to enable these services. Now, Giulio is the expert on this area, but basically there are opportunities for operators to act as local partners for cloud gaming providers. Music and audio partnerships are well established. Streaming music deals have been available for over a decade. I remember Orange and Deezer as one of the early ones. In certain cases in our Connected Consumer survey, I remember we found evidence that bundling streaming music services might reduce intention to churn for the core telecom service with which it was bundled. Then you have operators that have actually successfully launched their own streaming music service, like Turkcell's Fizzy, which has in the order of magnitude of several million users. The wider e-publishing sector includes books, magazines, and news. Not too many telecoms operators launch their own services, but in conjunction with suites of other services, they can build engagement. Play, in Poland, for example, offer a suite called Play 360, which includes audio and ebook access, but also free and discounted handset repair, as well as priority customer service access. Why are we looking at all of this? Well, primarily it's because we need to sell new generations of data connectivity, be that fixed or mobile, on something more than the expression, it makes downloads faster. This chart is from this year's Connected Consumer survey, so it shows 3Q 2020 data about what consumers think about different potential applications for 5G. Entertainment is a big part of the appeal. Respondents were asked if they knew about 5G and, if they did, what applications particularly interested them related to 5G. The chart shows consumers that said they were willing to pay extra to get that particular application or feature in dark blue, those that were interested but didn't want to pay for it in medium blue, and then those that were not interested in the pay list of blues. Some of the features that most appeal were, unsurprisingly, being able to download large files more rapidly and potentially using 5G as a fixed broadband connection. After that, a lot of the applications that show strong interest are entertainment related. Higher resolution video, enhanced in-car entertainment, AR or VR enabled services, gaming, and the intersection of the above two applications, new types of gaming that might include things like AR and VR. The key point I'd like you to take away from this slide, well, these first few slides, is that operator strategies in entertainment, or more specifically in gaming and video, is essentially a key part of their strategy for 5G. They have assets and or they have partnerships, and they can do more to associate 5G with differentiated quality of experience and exclusivities related to entertainment. In order to help operators to navigate this link between 5G and applications, we've released a series of reports that assess new consumer cases enabled by 5G. The latest report in that series focuses on VR video specifically. Now, the term VR video is a bit of an artificial construct on our part, and VR video is just one facet of a much wider category of technology and services that includes other VR applications, but also augmented reality, that's AR, and mixed reality, which is MR. Collectively, these are sometimes referred to as extended reality, which is XR. The boundaries between these categories is likely to erode over time as devices become more capable in terms of sensors, cameras, and connectivity, and more common. Our recent report focuses on VR video services, which can be broadly divided into two groups: video on demand services and live event streaming. I suppose esports is really a subset of live events, but worthy of a specific mention. We expect that beyond 2025, it will become harder to unpick the value of VR video independently of the value of other VR AR services and experiences, particularly those related to social interaction, which are likely to become an integrated part of almost all VR experiences. So, how much money are we talking about for VR video? These are worldwide numbers, specifically looking at what operators can make directly from VR video. These numbers look pretty small, but they belie the true impact because in the next 5 years, VR video is seldom going to be sold as a standalone service. The indirect value that the service adds to 5G in particular may be important. We forecast that operators will generate $8.5 billion cumulatively from VR video between 2020 and 2025, and that the rate of revenue growth will accelerate over time. 5G will enable 81% of the revenue generated from VR video by operators by 2025. The dark blue bars in this chart relate to 5G device revenues. That is, the commission that operators will generate from selling VR headsets that are 5G enabled. Last year, we estimated that 146 million VR headsets would be in circulation by the end of this year, rising to almost 340 million by 2025. The annual retail revenue generated by all VR devices sales will reach $25 billion per year by 2025. We estimate that by 2025, operators will account for around 1 in 15 of every headset sold, which, when you discount the amount of money that goes to the manufacturers, is about $1 billion per year opportunity. The medium blue bar is 5G content. That is, the direct revenues that VR video services will generate as a paid-for service. That becomes the most significant way that VR video generates revenue by 2025, and as you'll see on the next slide, we think that will grow further in the future for a number of reasons. The yellow bar is one aspect of the indirect value of VR video for operators that we can put a number on. Specifically, this is our estimate for upsold data that is the direct result of the increased consumption generated by VR video content. Finally, the grey bar is operator revenue that isn't tied to 5G. In the early years, that's partly 4G related, and later on in the forecast, it's to do with fixed associated or standalone sale of VR video content. The issue is that a lot of the value of VR video is not measurable because it's part of the service wrap for 5G. VR applications can be used to demonstrate to consumers that 5G is new and superior in proposition to 4G, and therefore can increase the willingness of consumers to upgrade. And that potentially unlocks a lot of value that doesn't appear in this chart, because VR video won't be the sole application that operators bundle into 5G tariffs. We can look at it a different way, which is helpful for a longer-term view. I suppose, as the last two slides indicate, part of the problem with sizing a market like this is establishing what you measure. Within a time frame of 5 years, we've established that VR video won't be a massive revenue generator for operators in its own right. Most of the content that's available right now is novelty content. True, there's coverage of some major sporting events like NBA basketball, but right now the audience for those things through VR is quite niche. The pandemic plays a role in how this plays out too. It disrupted supply chains in 2020, but in the next year, demand for VR will only be boosted by prolonged periods of lockdown and quarantine. The tech is improving too, and the first high-spec standalone 5G headsets will be with us in one development cycle's time. In the next 3 to 5 years, 6 degrees of freedom content will become more common. That is, VR experiences where you don't just pan your head around a moving 360-degree image, but can actually move your head to, say, look around an object. At that point, the user experience for live events will undergo a leap, and at that point, word of mouth and demand really starts to pick up. As we move beyond 2025, the line between VR and AR becomes increasingly blurred. This is the point where you start to get interesting new mixed reality experiences and the integration of VR elements into real-world interactions. And stronger AR, haptic feedback, that is touch, starts to make the experience more than just visual and audio. Around this time, we potentially start to see VR become a feature in video service tiers. In the longer term, VR video opens up the opportunity for more immersive storytelling experiences and greater emotional connections, which, in turn, improve customer satisfaction and retention. VR video may well become mainstream by 2030, at which point direct revenue will grow to figures much higher than these few billion figures that we're forecasting to 2025. How do operators get involved in VR video? Well, the value chain for 6 degrees of freedom content is slightly more complex than a typical VOD or OTT linear service because, at least in most current generation implementations, rendering occurs at the network edge rather than on the device itself. That being said, Google have developed an on-device solution for 6 degrees of freedom video, but it's going to be very bandwidth hungry. A low-resolution video needed 300 megabits per second in their trials, so we'd expect a gigabit in no time as resolutions increase. So, at least for the near future, edge processing and rendering will be required. In that sense, VR video has a lot of the same processing infrastructure requirements as cloud gaming. That all gets simplified down to a single item in this chart, service provision. In reality, service provision is formed of a number of sub-steps that probably require operators to form partnerships with software vendors, specifically cloud infrastructure as a service providers for edge processing and platform as a service middleware providers for content delivery. In terms of connectivity, based on what I was just saying about Google, supporting VR video is likely to require low latency connectivity of at least 300 megabits per second, so 5G is important here. Looking at the rest of this chart and thinking about the role of operators, I think that players that are already involved in the production of live sports content and already offer an OTT linear video service may be familiar with many elements of the value chain. The biggest difference between VR live events and regular sports coverage relates to the capture and compression of live VR video content. Operators that already have sports production capabilities may be able to extend their current practices to include 360-degree video capture, but operators without existing sports production facilities will need to establish appropriate rights, equipment, and production. Specialist companies have established themselves as partners in this space, and such partnerships are likely to take some of the labor out of the process for operators, particularly if they haven't already got the production capabilities for covering live sports. For example, NextVR had partnerships with live music and sporting event players such as the NBA, Fox Sports, and Wimbledon prior to its acquisition by Apple in May 2020, and they partnered with a number of operators. It's worth an aside on the role of advertising in all of this. We expect TV and video advertising to be one of the major revenue growth stories of the next 5 years. It's the reason that we expect the overall pay TV and OTT video market to grow so much between now and 2025. Advertising within a VR or AR setting, once we get the deployments right, could be really effective. Operators will have the same roles and options available to them with traditional TV advertising. We're seeing consolidation in the management of advertising slots for TV and video. So, for example, here in Western Europe, Sky is managing an ever-increasing amount of slots. It's probably going to be those same players that are managing this on VR. I think we've covered devices sufficiently already. For most scenarios, we're assuming that operators don't get involved in VR device manufacture directly, though there are exceptions. And so their role here is limited to distribution, which comes with it a limited sales margin. So we've discussed how operators deploy VR video from a technical point of view. What of going to market? Operators have a range of options. Right now, the focus is and should be on how you help to use VR to upsell premium connectivity. VR has the potential to be one of the key selling points for faster and better connectivity services in the mobile segment and potentially in the fixed broadband segment too. Earlier, I mentioned some of the limiting factors affecting VR video today. High device prices are unlikely to encourage consumers to spontaneously become willing to pay for a VR video service. Accordingly, we expect that most operators that engage with VR video will offer it as a value-added service in order to gain a critical mass of users. And to reiterate my earlier point, content partners are going to be really important in all of this. Forming the right partnerships with content creators may become a defining factor in the success of any given offering. A number of operators have formed the Global XR Telco Content Alliance for this reason. In particular, we believe that operators that combine esports and VR video are likely to reap rewards. What have we seen operators actually do so far? Here's a rough classification. Over to the right, we have a group of players that are experimenting with VR video as the future of TV. But more interesting is what's going on the left here. A number of operators are tying VR video specifically to 5G, and most commonly, they're using it to help upsell to larger allowances on 5G. O2 in particular is a great example that fits with what Stephen was saying in his previous session about online festivals and events. O2 have music venues, ticketing partnerships through O2 Priority, and now they're partnering with a service called Melody VR to put on exclusive concerts in their venues, available to their 5G customers. This is a great example of building a whole ecosystem around events, and VR fits so well into this. Looking at where pricing approaches are going for VR, I think they can and will vary in a manner similar to those for existing content value-added services. The next step is likely to be the use of VR video to upsell larger data allowances of the order of several hundred gigabytes or a terabyte per month. But if we look at how operators have approached data pricing with applications in the past, there are a few other potential pricing approaches, such as content-specific add-ons, so charging separately for VR video services as the quality and volume of VR video content increases. They could also integrate such services into higher value video tariffs, such as premium sports packages. The other big one is service-based pricing. VR video is data intensive. This means that it might be appealing for consumers to offer them zero-rated VR data passes, though this might be difficult for operators to implement in practice. VR video is an opportune place to experiment with the future of video content, device retail, and data pricing. It's a real microcosm of how telecoms and media relate to one another. I've mentioned esports a few times in passing, but haven't focused on it yet. And for the avoidance of doubt, when I say esports, I mean the broadcast of live streams of people playing computer games. Giulio is going to talk about the topic in more detail shortly, but first I wanted to draw attention to the relationship between esports, gaming, and VR video. The reason that VR video and esports fit well together is because, firstly, VR content and gaming appeal to very similar groups of people. Also, esports footage is already fully rendered in 3 dimensions without the need for obtrusive cameras that would get in the way of filming in real-world sports. It's also relatively affordable to create this content. Plus, if you're investing in edge computing capacity, then that can be applied to both rendering VR video content and to cloud gaming. But esports are also a way to experiment with how one might be able to experience other live sports through VR in future. So, for example, it's simple to apply information overlays in esports. That's a stepping stone to applying AR overlays to real-world sports in real-world scenarios, such as when you're in the sports arena and want live stats, and to switch seamlessly from your real-world view of the game to a live-action replay from whatever angle you choose. Social integration will, I suspect, also become near ubiquitous in VR applications. I think that this could extend to, for example, group voice chats from within live events, where you might have a mixed group of attendees, some of whom are there at the event in person, while others attend virtually. These two subgroups of people would communicate seamlessly and have a more communal experience than any current technology could offer. To look in more depth at gaming and esports, then, I'll hand over to Giulio.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Martin, for this for describing the synergies between esports and VR video and the value waiting for operators in such space. The synergies between esports and VR suggest that operators can explore similar opportunities in the gaming space. And today, I'm going to show you that in the next 5 years, operators have a unique opportunity to secure a position in the gaming value chain, because it will go through profound changes. The evolutionary path, in fact, of the distribution of any piece of digital entertainment points towards the separation between the consumption interface from the physical location of the content itself. Such separation decreases the cost of content delivery and separates ownership from consumption, lowering barriers to it. While such process is mature for static content, such as video and music, the deployment and evolution of 5G networks will make it possible and profitable at large scale for that process to happen also for gaming. Even though operators have benefited indirectly from the growth of the gaming market in the past, supporting gamers with high-speed connectivity, providing them with adult gaming bundles and zero-rated data, it is time for operators to secure a space in the value chain from which to obtain a long-term direct value, strengthen their brand, and develop network assets they can monetize across a wide range of use cases, of which VR video is one, but that extend to all B2C and B2B cloud-based services. First, I'm going to describe how cloud gaming and XR gaming will disrupt the mature content landscape and distribution model of video games. And then I will show you how synergic it will be for operators to expand their presence in esports, to strengthen their gaming brand and diversify in a space which lies in the middle of the two most important emerging categories. The combined retail revenue of cloud gaming and XR gaming services is going to grow from $2 billion in 2020 to $21 billion in 2025. With cloud gaming, we refer to a service that allows users to play a video game whose software runs on a cloud server that receives the inputs from the user, the remote device, and stream the video back to it. Google Stadia, PlayStation Now, GeForce Now are the most famous services, but there are several new global and regional players that are coming to the market. The retail revenue for such segment will reach $15 billion by 2025. With XR gaming, we refer to any VR, AR, and mixed reality game. At the moment, the most successful title is Pokemon Go, which accounts for most of the XR gaming retail revenue. But there is also a long tail of AR games for smartphones and games developed for a VR headset, which are growing in engagement and are showing promising user experience innovations. We estimate that this market will reach $6 billion by 2025. Of the whole gaming market, operators should focus their attention on these two segments because telcos' core assets are much more central to the service delivery than for traditional video games. Cloud and XR gaming services require a higher level of network connectivity performance than most traditional games to assure the necessary quality of service for even basic service consumption, and develop edge cloud infrastructure is necessary to support large-scale service deployments. Secondly, operators should focus on these two segments because they are going to change profoundly the gaming distribution model and break some of the current boundaries of video games. Changes of such magnitude allow players to access this market which they were never able to penetrate before. This is why, for example, all the hyperscalers have launched or are developing a cloud gaming proposition. Cloud gaming Cloud gaming bypasses the need for high-end hardware. Cloud gaming bypasses the need for high-end hardware, disintermediating traditional sales such as consoles or online platforms. This is a chance for publisher, and not just the largest one, to develop direct-to-consumer sales channels. Cloud gaming technology allows consumers to play any title on potentially any device. Therefore, it lays the condition for the creation of content optimized to be consumed across multiple devices. Multi-screen consumption is also the convergence point between cloud gaming and XR gaming. Complex XR content can be streamed from a gaming engine on the cloud to devices with low computational resources, such as smart wearable devices. Operators can secure direct and indirect revenue from gaming at the different stages of the cloud and XR ecosystem maturity. In the short term, they can upsell high-end connectivity to consumers, even via bundling own-branded and third-party services as value-added services. They can use such apps to showcase the value of 5G. In the medium term, they can couple go-to-market partner role with infrastructure as a service role, which allow them to consolidate their position in the gaming value chain. To conclude my introduction on the next generation gaming opportunity, I would like to highlight that there is a latent demand by consumers to upgrade their gaming activities, both in terms of performance and experience. If you recall at the beginning of the presentation, Martin illustrated some survey results that showed that there is no clear killer app for entertainment for 5G. Two of those questions asked whether respondents were willing to pay for 5G-enabled better gaming experience and new gaming experience such as AR and VR. In the figure on the right, you can see the result on those questions in two different subsamples. Hardcore gamers, that is the niche of high spenders and highly engaged gamers, versus casual gamers. That is the majority of online consumers who seldom play games and do not spend much money on them. Almost half of the first group is willing to pay for an upgrade, while less than 10% of the casual gamers are. Such a difference is likely a function of individual gaming experience, which might suggest that even most casual gamers might end up be willing to pay for one if exposed to the right content. Operators can develop a profitable and defensible position in these segments if they leverage the role of enablers to close the remaining gaps in the value chain and partner with the other key stakeholders to accelerate the maturation of the service ecosystems, edge cloud resources, educate consumers to the value of cloud and XR capabilities. Telcos can sustain the production of XR gaming content. They can join global initiatives such as the Planet Scale AR Alliance by Niantic and the Global XR Content Telco Alliance, which Martin mentioned when talking about VR. Investment and partnership with the local international content producer to sustain the development of XR content is also synergic to their involvement in this market, which they can distribute via their own channels, sometimes in exclusivity if they get lucky. The setup of XR content development studios is also an option which has been done by SK Telecom and Verizon in the last couple of years. Operators are the natural go-to-market partners of cloud and XR gaming service providers. As gaming service provider, they can resell third-party services or own-branded ones. Operators and gaming service providers can form go-to-market partnerships that can lower the barriers to consumers' uptake. Bundling such services with operators' core connectivity plans allowed cloud and XR gaming services to be offered directly to those consumers that would get the most out of their experience. As part of their go-to-market strategies, operators can leverage the operational size, the knowledge of the local market, and the relationship with its customer base to design a marketing communication campaign aimed at educating consumers about the services proposition of cloud gaming. And as infrastructure as a service provider, they can leverage their machine edge computing and network management capabilities to differentiate on-branded services by quality of experience or sell that differentiation power to third-party gaming providers. They can do so independently if they have sufficient scale, or they can join multi-carrier initiatives aimed at pooling individual edge capacity. Operators can use gaming as one of the many potential use cases to build a business case for edge cloud investment. Further, their end-to-end traffic management capabilities and analytical tools available with 5G standalone cores will be crucial in ensuring they require the quality of service when cloud and XR gaming services will hit the mass market. Finally, the telcos with the highest ambition in the gaming space should aim at becoming service aggregators, a role that combines the go-to-market partner and infrastructure as a service role. Operators that offer on-brand gaming services, for example, can offer their platform to third-party service providers. They can offer go-to-market opportunities to publishers and developers that plan to go direct to consumers, that include a reliable infrastructure and a sales channel and shared marketing expenditures. Such a distribution model also benefits operators' consumer proposition that can add new, high-end content without investing in expensive distribution rights. Operators and pay TV providers that want to develop a gaming brand, strengthen their brand equity, empower toward gamers, and diversify in a promising content category should build an esports proposition. The growth of esports is one of those trends that were growing organically very strongly before COVID, that have been significantly accelerated by it. 2020 has been a turning point in esports because consumers' awareness and viewership of it grew so much. And as you can see on the left side of the slide, the viewership of esports content boomed in 2020. Between plus 90% and plus 200% in hours viewed on the most established esports platform, with the average number of viewers that grew by 50% just for Twitch, the largest streaming platform. Esports viewers have traditionally belonged to a niche of core and hardcore gamers, but now it appears to be changing. As you can see from the graph on the right-hand side, between 10% and 20% of the online population, as captured by our survey, regularly consume esports content, which is a fraction of the total number of gamers. However, the fraction that consume esports grew significantly compared to 2019. For example, in Europe, it grew by 5 percentage points, while the overall gaming population in our survey didn't grow as much. While the number of gamers remain roughly the same. It is an interesting development because at the same time, the global esports revenue declined due to the cancellation of live events, the drop in advertising and sponsorship revenue, as it happened with traditional sports, actually. Such boost in engagement is expected to continue because consumers will be more and more exposed to esport content. It is not just about watching professional esports players on competition. Indeed, most of the growth in esports viewership in 2020 happened around amateur and user-generated content and local events, because watching gaming content is part of the gamer relationship with their own social circle. Further, most of social media and online platforms are putting esports at the center of their consumer product proposition, boosting esports awareness and consumption growth. Esports are a key element of the gamer social interactions and as well as content consumption, and therefore operators have to build a presence in this space to strengthen their brand as gaming service providers. We expect that operators will ramp up their investment in this space because there is an opportunity to diversify a relatively cheap content category via the traditional strategies, such as sponsorship, national leagues, live and online events, and professional teams, and including professional sports, esports content to the linear and on-demand video products. However, operators should also take care of the bourgeoising social community-based esports, partnering with esports tournament or local esports tournament organizers to incentivize the setup of such local amateur leagues, and even support the grassroots organization of these engagements. Operators should also partner with esports platforms to design value-added services or traffic management partnerships aimed at optimizing critical features such as multi-stream viewing. That's why we think that operators' best approach to esports is one that balances the investment in professional content and support to the community-based esports. And now over to you, Martin, for some concluding remarks.
Thanks, Giulio. So, in conclusion, there's money to be made in entertainment beyond standard TV and video. Operators can diversify into adjacent content areas and grow new markets and content categories. Secondly, VR video and 5G are a good fit. Whilst the direct revenue in the short term doesn't look to amount to much, VR video helps make the case for 5G as a different and superior technology to 4G. And then Giulio?
Yes, and operators can secure a share of the 147 billion worldwide gaming revenue by entering the cloud gaming value chain and embracing the new way of gaming. Yeah, and David, I think we are done with our presentation, and we're really eager to get questions from the audience.
Great, yes, perfect. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Giulio. And I would just start off by saying thank you to everyone who has submitted questions throughout the Q&A session. There is still some time for you to add some last-minute questions. So I've picked one out that a delegate put in earlier around basically how much revenue growth can operators realistically get. So I'll read the question out so it's all in context. So how much of the $130 billion revenue growth in gaming can operators realistically get?
I mean, Martin, maybe I can start addressing that, and then maybe you can add some. Basically, from our perspective, the gaming will become already is like one of the most important entertainment sources of entertainment for people, for consumers. But it will even become more so in the next 5 years, because people will access new devices, not just have to playing on the smartphones. The type of game that people will play on the different devices will evolve. So there will be players overall will increase will upgrade their experience on their own. Plus, those that are not still playing games will actually do it. Of that, operators will indirectly benefit from increasing data consumption. To that depends on their involvement in actually upselling that, actually on pricing that kind of data. But on the other hand, what we are interested in is actually getting into the value chain, because they can actually make their own decisions and basically, become, owners of their own destiny in the gaming value chain. And basically adding to entering into those two segments that we mentioned before will allow them to target an opportunity of 21 billion in retail revenue by 2025. However, we expect, as Martin was mentioning for VR, that actually pie will actually grow even further in the following years, because the efficiency of cloud-based gaming is that also it actually decreases the cost of delivering goods, the cost of goods on all of the intermediary steps in the value chain. So that kind of technology will actually have an even larger potential in the years after that. Martin,
so I suppose to add to, yeah, sure. To add a little bit to that. Thank you, David. Sorry, there's a little bit of a lag on the line. I apologize for talking over you. So I suppose adding a little bit to that, the question was specifically about how much operators can get from this. I think we've seen a shift in the way that gaming is sold over the last, I suppose, 10 years, since massive online role-playing games started to become more of a thing, from being very much transactional around device sales and the one-off sale of physical media that contain the games through to subscription services. And that transition is going to very significantly continue to shift. Ad-funded, freemium, and subscription. And this is very much operators' ballpark. So how much of this operators can get really depends, beyond what Giulio was saying about getting more involved deeper in the value chain, in what they can retail and what fits with their telecoms and media service proposition more generally. So the role that they play in device retail, while device retail is still relevant, and the role that they play in either bundling partner services or launching their own. Thank you. Good question.
Great. Thanks, guys. We've got time for maybe one or two more, actually. Here's one around VR data. So one of the delegates asked earlier on in the session, how realistic is zero-rated pricing for VR data?
I'll take that. It's a good question. I think inevitably, as time passes and usage allowances increase generally, driven in part by demand for high bandwidth applications like VR video, it becomes more realistic to offer zero rating for these things. So if we look at how zero rating worked for like OTT video and that kind of thing, I suppose the earlier implementations focused on managing bandwidth through things like downgrading video resolution. So you'd have like unlimited YouTube and Netflix streaming, but it would be in SD rather than in HD. Now, I can see why that would be more of a problem for things like VR video, because I think it's very apparent if you're like viewing something in a lower resolution or a lower frame rate on VR than it would be if you were watching it on a mobile handset. So potentially that makes it more challenging to use compression to basically get round managing VR video. The other issue may be net neutrality and how that is approached. Realistically, though, I think in particular if solutions like Google's experimental one for 6 degrees of freedom video, where it's actually just a video stream and then all of the processing actually happens on the device, when we get to that point, then it can just be managed like any other video would be. And so I think I'm definitely thinking longer term when I think about zero rating VR video, and when usage allowances of, I don't know, 500 gigabytes or a terabyte are more typical. But I think we will get there, and I think we'll probably get there quicker than we think.
Thanks, Martin.
Yeah. If you also
Julia,
can
do you have
add.
Something to add?
Yes, thank you, Martin, thank you, David. Just to add a little bit on this. This is also a thing that you can accommodate VR video and gaming on the data pricing element, because VR video is higher bandwidth intensive, but also on the latency side, you might have something similar. So, for example, that terabyte of zero rating data that Martin was talking about can also be applied. It can also be linked to the latency assurance, and that actually
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I mean, now we will be talking about a bit of futuristic stuff, but if all the promises of what 5G cores can, and the application with 5G cores when deployed, standalone cores, of course, in 5G networks are true, then it will be possible for operators to actually manage the traffic latency. To have a complete view on the traffic latency, and from end to end, from service provider to user, and they will be able to proactively or reactively, depends on the software that they use, to decrease the network, the traffic spikes, and make the and provide more resilience to the service delivery. I think, and that can be priced both actively to the users via zero rating, but also on a B2B side with B2B partnerships. Zero rating, like net neutrality is an issue, but I think it's that will probably. There are some boundaries between active network management and and the one that you have to do for basically like making sure that your quality of minimal quality of service is assured. So there is also some. We will actually monitor this market to understand how it will develop in the future as well. Thank you, David and Martin.
Thank you very much, Julio. That's great. I think I'll ask you one more question. I'll have to ask you very politely to keep the answer short on this because we are approaching the end of time. But there was actually a lot of questions we've received on cloud gaming. So one final one is, did cloud gaming have any effect on Apple's choice to change the fees for some developers?
That's a good question, because it's I think it's news of like last week or 2 weeks ago that basically Apple decreased the fees that they get from small developers on the Apple Store. Probably it's part of the what Apple's view long term is probably like the fact that they realize that it's a super mature market, one of the Apple Store, of the app stores, and there are competing app stores. There is Harmony. There is Huawei's Harmony is growing significantly on that, and probably they also want to decrease the barriers to entry on their app stores. On the other hand, there was an issue between game streaming and cloud gaming and the monetization on the App Store, on App Stores, but not just Apple Stores, but also the Play Stores. And basically, one of those issues is the fact that it was hard to actually understand what revenue stake could be accessed. Could be retained by the App Store because of the way the terms and conditions were written. It's probably the case that also this. It's more the case that this policy choice by Apple will have an effect on the small, like the startups and the small tiers cloud gaming service provider than actually the other way around. But it is also probably one of the things that Apple will have in their mind, making sure that they can ease the access to basically easy access of game streaming services to their own app stores without any cat fights like there was some not related to cloud gaming, but there were a few with gaming companies, especially this summer, the one with Epic. That's what I can say.
Good, Giulio, thank you very much. And I think on that we'll wrap up quite nicely. So I would just say, there are a lot of questions I can see here that we just simply don't have the time to get to. However, we will get back to you directly. A member of our team will get back to you directly after the event. So really just allow me lastly to say thank you very much for attending the Analysys Mason Telecoms Summit. Thank you again to all the presenters from all our keynote and breakout sessions over the last couple of days. Just a reminder that all day 1 and day 2 sessions will be available for you to watch on demand. They'll be available within a couple of hours, and you'll be able to access them through your platform login link for several months. So there's no rush on having to consume them straight away. We will have them up for several months. And if you do have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact us via the contact link at the top of the event homepage, or you can request an analyst briefing as well. There is a link again for that at the top of the event homepage. And apart from that, I would just finally say once again, thank you very much for attending this Telecoms Summit, and we look forward to welcoming you to another Analysys Mason event in the future.
Thank you all.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.